Happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday, March the 19th, the 78th day of the year. There are 289 days left in the year 2024. Welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with Thom. Well, congratulations and condolences are in order today. First, the condolences to the family of Big Lynn Johnson, a teammate of mine from the 1974 Auburn team that went 10-2, finished number 8 in the country. Was probably the best team I ever played on, and Big Dozier, we called him, was one of the reasons why. He was a standout at offensive guard and a nice guy, smart and a great teammate. I can't remember if he was a freshman or a sophomore that year, but I do remember he was a road grader. He could move people out of the way. I was sorry to hear the news of Big Lynn and send my condolences to his family. Congratulations to the Auburn University basketball team, the champs of the Southeastern Conference basketball tournament this year, and the best of luck to them as they enter the NCAA National Tournament, or March Madness as it is called. It's exciting, and it's a lifetime memory for the young men and the coaches. For all who play team sports, you know how rare it is to get all the way to the mountaintop and to look over and see the possibility of a championship. It's very, very special. Go get them, Auburn. I can't talk about the success of Auburn basketball without mentioning one more good friend, my good friend, Henry Harris, and his contributions to not only to this team, but to every team that has played at Auburn since 1970. Yes, Henry played basketball at Auburn, but that sentence alone diminishes his contribution to Auburn basketball, Auburn athletics, and the Southeastern Conference. See, Henry's points scored and his other statistics on the court are also secondary to his contributions. You see, Henry Harris was the first Black athlete in any sport at Auburn University. Henry played when none of his teammates looked like him, nor did the majority of players from the other teams throughout the Southeastern Conference. Never heard of Henry Harris? That's normal. Henry's history is neatly tucked away in Auburn's sports past. I remember him in his number 25 Auburn University jersey, his smile, his taut muscles, and his 6'3" frame crouched in the ready position. He would give his all to Auburn and the people he represented. Then he would seek his comfort somewhere off campus because those were the times. The current team has so many followers that the arena has a section referred to as the jungle. The crowd noise is deafening, and basketball is a happening at Auburn thanks to Bruce Pearl and the current coaching staff. I often wonder what Henry would think if he was still alive to see what his contributions have produced at Auburn University. What would he think of the current version of Auburn basketball? How he would embrace the coaches and the players and be proud of what they're doing. I'll think of him as I often do when I watch this week's game and pull for his offspring, the current version of the Auburn basketball team. Our G-List guest today is another historical figure, Willie Wyatt. Mr. Wyatt was one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit of Lee versus Macon County Board of Education that eventually led to the desegregation of public schools in Alabama. September 1964, he was one of 2 Black undergrads to enroll in Auburn University. Our show today, of course, is sponsored by the Best Girl Consulting Firm, so let's hear from Best Girl.
Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. Best Girl's team of consultants, led by Joyce Gilly-Gossam, Emily Hedrick, and Sean Jones, partners with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, communication, motivation, and leadership, with always an impact on the bottom line. Best Girl's customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communication, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development.
Best Girl customizes the solution that fits your needs. So let's go to our roundtable regulars, Barbara Wallace-Edwards and Michael Walker. Good morning, Barbara Wallace-Edwards. How are you?
Good morning, Thom. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you this morning?
Doing very well. Thank you. So let's see. You were on a panel last week at the university. You want to tell us about it?
A couple of weeks ago, I was on a panel celebrating Black History Month at Auburn, and along with our G-list guest today and a couple other individuals, we had a wonderful time talking about Auburn through the decades. And so we were asked to talk about our experience as an Auburn student and how it has impacted our lives. And it was a very interesting event. The president of the university was there with his beautiful wife, Dr. Chris Roberts, and his wife, Tracy. A couple of the deans were there, vice president. So and tons of students and families and friends and community leaders were there as well. So it was a great event.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes.
Right. Good morning, Michael Walker. How are you, buddy?
Good morning, TG. I'm doing well. I hope you are too. Good morning, Barbara, to you as well.
Good morning, sir.
So what's happening in your world, Michael?
Well, we got quite a few things going on. You know, here in Atlanta, local politics is all about the judge ruling in the Fani Willis case on Friday. And it's quite interesting to have these discussions because the judge ruled that Fani Willis had to make the decision whether or not she removed herself or Nathan Wade, who is her former lover, but also lead prosecutor on the Trump case. And I feel like the judge just made a safe choice, is what he did. And he just gave it back to them and said, one of you have to go for the optics reason. He also said that there was no concrete evidence that a conflict of interest occurred. Well, if there's no concrete evidence that a conflict of interest occurred, then why does anyone have to be removed?
Right.
I don't understand it.
That was going to be my question for you.
Yeah.
No, it was just to be safe because he was appointed in this position by Governor Kemp. He's about 33, 34 years old from what I understand. And I think it was a way of him trying to navigate the landmines of making any other type decision. And he needed to at least maybe remove someone. And he said it's because of the appearance of something that could be going on nefarious. That's my word, not his. But basically is what he's saying is the public will look at that and view it as a conflict of interest. Now, but
it wasn't a conflict of interest. So whether it looked like it or not, they couldn't prove it.
Well, you know, I hear you, Barbara. You know, but the thing that bothers me about this is Trump's entire conflict of interest, and nobody speaks of that.
Right.
Okay.
Michael, I'm sorry, Michael, you cut out. Can you say that for me again?
I said President Trump's entire tenure as president was a conflict of interest, and nobody speaks to that. And what I mean by that is whenever dignitaries came from out of the country, they had to stay at the Trump Hotel and pay him. Whenever he traveled throughout the world or wherever he had properties, his detail had to stay there and he charged the government. Is that not a conflict of interest?
Yeah, absolutely.
But nobody talks about that.
That wasn't just the appearance of a conflict of interest. That was truly a conflict of interest.
That was truly a conflict of interest, you know, and, you know, I've had a couple of my colleagues talk about this particular case. And I said to them, I said, help me to understand something. So Fani Willis was a single woman and she had an affair with another guy. And it's a conflict of interest so much to the point that they need to be disqualified from trying a case. However, Trump was a married man running for president, and he was recorded on tape saying, just grab him by the pee. But he gets to be president. Help me understand that. And nobody can answer that question.
If she's a single woman and she's dating this man, is that an affair?
Right.
I mean, when you're single, you can date who you want to, right? I don't know. Was he married? I don't know the answer to that.
I think maybe he was going through a divorce or what have you at the time, but obviously his marriage was irretrievably broken, as they say. So what difference does it make? And it's so much of a conflict that they need to be disqualified from trying the case. And ironically, since the judge has ruled, Trump's people and all the other defendants want to appeal this decision, and they want Fonnie Willis off the case.
Right.
That's not enough that Nathan Wade had to be removed. They offered up Nathan Wade as a sacrificial lamb, and they're not happy with that. They want Fonnie Willis off the case.
They're going on to say that even if Trump loses the case, they have grounds for appeal based on the fact that Fonnie Willis wasn't disqualified, wasn't removed. It's outlandish. They are just.
Well, hopefully he won't run out of money before he pays all these lawyers, because he got a heck of a legal bill coming.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because he's having trouble now securing that $478 million payment bond.
Right.
That he needs. I wish I was the agent on that case, man.
Yeah.
$480 million bond. I'd love to provide that bond.
Yes.
I hear you.
Yeah. Supposedly he secured the money, and all of a sudden there's problems now. So
yeah.
Not sure what happened.
Yeah, well, it's interesting also that when he first ran for president, he said he wouldn't take any money. He'd finance it himself, and all the people supported him. Everybody forgot about that too, huh?
Yes, yes.
I
got you. Forgot about building that wall and making the Mexicans pay for it too.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I forgot. And now they want to vote for him again.
Yeah. It's America.
I don't know. I always said I'm not the brightest knife, the brightest bulb, or the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I just don't understand. I must not be as smart as these Trump supporters, because they see something I don't see.
Well, I agree. Well, I don't know.
You're the smart one. They're the ones that's missing something.
It goes back to Obama, and
True.
There's an element that came out when Obama became president. I started watching a documentary last night, and I went to sleep on it about Johnny Cash. And I always liked Johnny Cash. You look, well, hello, I'm Johnny Cash. But Johnny Cash appealed to an element in the community. And that element was probably a lot of the people who vote for Trump.
Right.
But he wanted to do that. That was his thing. These were his people, he said.
Right.
I mean, I liked him anyway. He went to prison. He did Folsom Prison thing and made that song about being in Folsom Prison and all that stuff. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I really wish I did know the appeal. But now I've had some people, my friend down the street, who's been involved in politics in Florida for the longest, and he's Republican. He's always voted Republican. He will vote Republican, but he says he can't vote for Trump. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah.
But and here's the other thing: the whole thing about the bloodbath. However you meant it, whatever you meant it, how harmless you meant it. If you're running for president of the United States, you don't say dumb SHIT like that. You just don't say that. So
unless you're Trump.
Well, he's gotten away with everything else, Thom, so he feels like he can get away with that as well.
I guess so.
Speaking of politicians and what happened, I may have figured out how Tommy Tuberville is living in Florida and running as a senator in Alabama.
Please explain to us.
There you go. Yeah, I want to hear it too.
Well, first of all, let me set the table for you. John Rogers, an 83-year-old state legislator, who is the longest running legislator in the state of Alabama, has just resigned due to wire fraud and what have you, where he was involved in a scheme where he got $400,000 for a youth camp. And, through this scheme and stuff, he got a kickback of $200,000. So he has to pay restitutions of $197,000. But in the story, they talked about this is like the third or fourth legislator in a 4-year term to have to resign. And it mentioned that a representative by the name of David Cole, a Republican from Huntsville, last year pleaded guilty to a voter fraud charge that he rented a closet-sized space in a home to fraudulently run for office in a district where he did not live.
Wow.
Yeah, we talked about that on the show earlier this year.
That's what Tuberville's doing.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Tuberville's down here on spring break.
He lived there, Thom.
He'll go up to Alabama and say something dumb and, and get on the news and
and come right back. Right.
So let me ask you, well, we're on politics, we may as well go. What about Katie Britt? You guys, what's your comments on that?
Poor Katie. The sad thing is she's the better senator in the state, even though she's had some issues herself. But
you don't let people use you.
Right.
Absolutely. Me of the Herschel Walker thing.
I think that's a case of wanting to be on the national stage just a little bit too badly, and this is my opportunity. I got to seize it. And a lot of times when you're trying to craft your career and stuff, you have to be very judicious and selective about what you do and how you do it,
Well, I'll even put it in plainer English than that. You can't let people use you.
Right.
You can't let people put you out there to do something that they wouldn't do.
True.
Why was she selected? I mean, she's a woman. I get that, they're in trouble with the whole abortion thing and IVF and all that stuff. But don't want it that bad, man.
Well, I'm of the opinion that other people are pulling her strings. They're her providing the funding for her to run and keep her there and giving her support that she needs. So she's probably has to do those things in order to keep that position. And it's sad, it's like selling your soul to the devil.
You're there for 6 years. So in 6 years, I can figure out what I'm going to do next,
I agree.
Well, that's true too. But you also have committee assignments and leadership assignments which will further your career. And that's really important. So they can kind of make you a powerful senator just like that, so that's the other part of it, I got something I'd like to run this by you guys. And you all know that I'm in the insurance business. A student in Taiwan, he was talked into amputating both of his legs to get $1.3 million in insurance money. Well, the problem is that when he was treated, well, first of all, let me tell you how he did it. His partner in crime convinced him to soak his feet in ice for like 8 to 10 hours to get frostbite. And therefore he'd have to have his legs amputated.
Oh my God.
So he went through this, but it all backfired on him when a doctor examined him and felt like his wounds were suspicious. And they found out that, they were. He only got $7,300.
Wow.
And now he has to give that back. And he's arrested.
And he ain't got his legs.
And he lost his legs. Wow.
Well, I'll add one to it. In Louisville, the city came up with a program where if the police officers would move into the neighborhoods that they were policing, there was a financial incentive to move into these neighborhoods that they patrolled. That was 3 years ago. There hasn't been one police officer that has taken this program home, that has said, okay, I'll move into these neighborhoods.
Right.
So it says a lot about those neighborhoods and what's going on in Louisville, Kentucky.
That is something else right there.
Yes,
they patrol it, but they don't want to live in it.
Right. It's funny, like in the place where I live, there are a couple police cars here in the neighborhood all the time. They live here, but they happen to live here, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's all about location.
Yeah. Okay, you guys got anything else? We're going to move on to.
Well, Tom, I just wanted to mention you congratulated Auburn. I also want to congratulate from our state that made the NCAA tournament. UAB, Sanford, Auburn, and Alabama made the NCAA tournament this year. So that may be the first time we've had 4 teams to actually make the NCAA tournament, and that's the men's tournament. So women's, I think we have both Alabama and Auburn as well who make the NCAA. So that is a tremendous feat.
Okay.
Yes, it is. So congratulations to all of them. I told Thom at the beginning of the season when I saw Auburn play the first time, I thought they had a pretty good team and everything. And I still believe that. I think that a couple things they need to do is they got to focus on being able to play good, solid defense without committing so many fouls. I think that's their Achilles heel. And the other thing is that we need more people to crash the boards. A lot of times it's just Janai Broom down there on the boards by himself. To go deep, you got to be able to eat that glass. You got to have some rebounders, and we need those forwards to get in there and crash those boards too to help.
Especially offensive boards. We very seldom get an offensive rebound. So if we miss a shot, there's no one underneath to get the ball. So they definitely need to improve on that area.
Yeah, they're going to have to get more physical underneath, And I said this before, Auburn is not a physical team. They can play physical, but they're not a physical team. They're really better as a finesse team, because they want to run, gun, and do all that. But to go deep, you got to be able to go down there and get dirty under that board.
So true.
Well, we ought to be able to beat Yale. I don't know, unless Yale's got something I don't know about. We ought to be able to beat Yale.
There's
they're
some
a real tough bracket though. That's the same bracket with
they are.
They beat Yale.
UConn.
They got to go to play San Diego State, and then they got UConn and stuff. So everybody's
UConn's tough.
Auburn, UConn in the
they
Swede.
are.
Anyway, well, let's move on. We got to move on. So Sean's got a minute for us. Sean, you out there?
Good morning to everyone joining in with us. My name is Shantia Jones, and this is Got a Minute. As you all know, we're down to the wire for Women's History Month, and I came across something super interesting called Miss Magazine. That's right, like, excuse me, Miss Magazine. A magazine for women that treat contemporary issues from a feminist perspective. Miss Magazine was founded by Gloria Steinem, an American feminist, political activist, and editor who gave much of her time to the political organizations and became an advocate for the women's liberation movement during the late 20th and early 21st centuries. She participated in the founding of the Coalition of Labor Union Women, Voters for Choice, and the Women's Media Center. In 2016, she hosted the television documentary series Woman by Gloria Steinem, which focused on issues that concerned females. Continue to enjoy Women's History Month. Thank you all for joining in. My name is Shantia Jones, and this is Got a Minute.
Women are now taking themselves seriously, and women's interests are much more profound than how to make meatloaf 12 new ways.
Gloria Steinem is editor of MS. A feminist campaigner and writer, she was one of the founders.
It started in desperation, I think, because there were just a great many women writers and editors who didn't feel that they were working on magazines that they read. It just was clear that there was no other way that we could be honest about women's experience.
Thank you, Sean. That was neat. Sean, would you get in the chat with Anthony Tedeschi and tell him how he can order the book since they go through you anyway? Would you do that? Thank you, Sean. So let's go to our G-list guest. Our G-list guest is Willie Wyatt. Willie was a plaintiff in the lawsuit of Lee versus Macon County Board of Education that eventually led to the desegregation of all public schools in Alabama. September 1964, he was one of two of the first Black undergrads to enroll in Auburn University. So let's hear, Mr. Wyatt, are you out there?
Yeah, Thom, thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for being here. How are you this morning?
Just doing great in wonderful Stone Mountain, Georgia.
All right. All right. So I'm just going to go right. Tell me what it was like in the 1960s to when you entered Auburn University in 1964.
I, along with Anthony Lee, entered Auburn University in 1964 as the first two undergrad students at the university. Harold Franklin, who was a graduate student, had enrolled that December. So we were the undergrads. It was a last minute decision by us and our parents to go on to Auburn University based on the fact that they did not acknowledge the fact that we had applications and intended to enroll in Auburn until a week before classes were supposed to start. And the only way we got their attention then was thanks to the postal service that we used to know. We sent certified mail, and that kind of forced them to respond because they also knew that the school integration case out of Macon County was still very active, and that could be pigtailed onto the post-secondary kind of situation. But our application was accepted, we were accepted, but we don't have dormitory space for you. So that was supposed to be the deterrent. They did not realize how resourceful Black people can be. We lived in Tuskegee, and there were several people who worked in Tuskegee who actually lived in Auburn. So our parents were able to find a person, Ralph Foster, who happened to be, Thom will probably know that, the Black mayor of Auburn.
Yeah.
But at any rate, he rented us a room for the first, for as long as we needed to be there. But surprisingly enough, at the end of the first quarter, all of a sudden the university had dormitory space. And the dormitory space was next door to Harold Franklin. So we actually shared a bathroom with Harold, which is something that we could have done earlier because we're all on the first floor. And Harold, as most of you on the call will probably know, he had the first floor of the dormitory to himself. So that was the saga of how we got there. That first quarter at Auburn was, let me say, it was not a welcoming atmosphere. Being the only two Black students on campus, Harold was a graduate student. He was only on campus a couple days a week for classes, and the other time he was either spent in Montgomery or Talladega or Birmingham. He was a military veteran, so he obviously had other buddies and friends and family. So we were kind of the only two. And to go into the dormitory and keep your window up in kind of the quadrangle, I can't remember what the name of the dorm is or was, but I understand. Magnolia. Okay. It's been down. Has it been knocked down now?
Yeah,
Yes, it's been torn down.
I thought it had been. But if you stayed in the first floor and everybody on campus knew where we were, if you walked through the quadrangle, they would get catcalls and that kind of thing because the dorm was not air conditioned. So as a result, the windows were up. It was quite a chore to walk down and go through the TV room and pick up your mail and at the mail spot. But one of the more interesting things that used to happen was there were a couple guys from Jersey who befriended us. And every once in a while they would say, well, why don't you guys come down? Or why don't you, Willie? Because Anthony was not very athletic anyway, but come down and play some ping pong. So I'd take him up on that. And as soon as the ball hit the floor, somebody stepped on it because everybody stopped playing ping pong when we got there. So as a result, we'd go through a dozen ping pong balls in less than 20 minutes. based on the fact that when they hit the floor, they were dead because they were going to be stepped on. And it was, oh, I'm sorry. But it didn't, it was just different. Eating was a situation where if you go into the cafeteria to eat, and they had little chit books at that time that we would buy weekly. If you needed a table, all you had to do was walk up and find one seat, and all of a sudden you were sitting by yourself. It was one of those tough kinds of situations. I can remember now that I had a couple of evening classes that would end just about dusk dark. And when I reflect on that at my age now, I said, that was kind of foolish to walk that campus during the late evening and not know and knowing that there were people there who really didn't want you there. But anyway, that was kind of how it went. There were classes that had study groups, but we were not allowed. We were not invited to the study groups, did not know they existed. Normally when the professors had classes, or you had classes, you were kind of directed to, well, you need to kind of sit over there kind of thing. And there was nobody to turn to and say, these things are going on.
Okay. Barbara, you got a question for Mr. Wyatt? You were on the panel with him, is that right?
I was, and he was a great panelist. Good morning, Mr. Wyatt, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for the invitation.
You and I have talked extensively about our history at Auburn and how you were there in 1964, and I came in 1975, and things hadn't changed much during that time period because I went through some of the same experiences you did. Did not get assigned a dorm room, and I was accepted at Auburn, ended up living off campus. Had some of the same issues with professors and fellow students. Didn't want to invite me to join their study groups, and in situations where we were teamed up and paired up in classes, nobody wanted to be my partner. So yeah, things hadn't changed much during that 11 years period. So I hope that things are much, much better today at Auburn, and I'm not sure that they are. But to your high school years, that Macon County, and you were going to Tuskegee High School. Did you ever get a chance to attend Tuskegee High School? Talk about that whole experience.
That experience started out in September of '63 when there were 12 students that were accepted for the integration program of the schools of Macon County. And upon our arrival at Tuskegee Public, which was the white high school, the bus was approached by Alabama State Troopers, led by Captain Pryor. I'll never forget that name, who boarded the bus and handed each one of us letters, each one of us meaning the students, from the Governor Wallace, who said that, this school cannot be integrated. You will not go to school here, and said to the bus driver, just turn them around and take them back. So we went back over to the superintendent's office, which was only a couple blocks away. And we had kind of been forewarned that was probably going to be the case for that particular day by our attorney and by the Justice Department. So that was not a big surprise. But 3 days later, we were back in court, and the Justice Department said, don't worry about it. We got it covered. Robert Kennedy's got us covered. So we're in good shape. So as a result, we did go back about 3 days later, and instead of Captain Pryor boarding the bus, the Alabama National Guard boarded the bus to say, you got to turn around. You can't go here. So in an effort to not give up on our end, we went back to court. Robert Kennedy subsequently federalized the Alabama National Guard. So when we went back to school like a week later, there were just guardsmen there, and there was no incident. That went on for roughly until Christmas time, when Austin Meadows, who was the superintendent of education at the time, and Barbara will probably remember some of these names, he was the superintendent of education for the state of Alabama, decided it was not economically feasible to have a high school with heating bills and teachers and everything else, because our teacher ratio was basically 1.5 teachers to each student.
Wow.
Since there were only 12 of us, because all the white kids had walked out.
So they weren't even there at the school any longer.
They were no longer at the school. So Meadows decided that, okay, we can't operate this school economically. So as a result, we're going to close Tuskegee Public and force those students who were at Tuskegee Public to go back to Tuskegee Institute High School, which was the black high school.
All right.
Fred Gray got in the mix and said, okay, we're not going to play this silly game with them. What we're going to do is split you guys up 6 and 6. Six kids will go to Notasulga High School, which was Klan territory, and 6 kids will go to Shorter High School. And after the Christmas break, that's exactly what we did. And for the period of time that we went to Notasulga, we were escorted each day by U.S. Marshals in front and in back of the bus. U.S. Marshals would sit outside of the school during school hours to escort us back home by bus. The locals would always stand on the street, thinking that, okay, if we stand out here and demonstrate, you're not gonna feel comfortable enough to be here.
Right.
One incident that I remember distinctly was when we first went to Notasulga, the 6 of us. There were 6 senior boys, Anthony Lee, Willie Wyatt, and Robert Judkins, who's now deceased. And there were 3 young ladies, 2 8th graders, and one junior. And when we got to Notasulga on the first day, Mayor Ray, who was the mayor of the great town of Notasulga, population somewhere around 800 probably, he boarded the bus and decided, in his statement was, you can't go to school here because there is a fire ordinance and there will be overcrowding if 6 other students enter. So, unbeknown. Well, it's a laughing matter now, Tom. But
now, yeah,
at the time,
it
wasn't then.
Right.
But
right.
But on that particular day, we had boarded the bus at the superintendent's office and down in Tuskegee, and there was a ride of about 15 miles up to Notasulga. And unbeknown to us, a photographer had gotten on the back of the bus through the back door, and he had been observed by the state troopers at that point in time because the federal guys, other than the U.S. Marshals, had gone away. So when we got to Notasulga and Mr. Mayor Ray got on the bus to tell us we couldn't go to school there that day, as the bus was getting ready to pull off, the back door was opened and the state troopers stormed the bus to attack the photographer. The photographer they were using cattle prods and that kind of thing on it. It was the first time I'd really experienced that or seen that. And they were flailing away at him, and they broke his camera, and some of the plastic began to fly, and it did hit a couple of us and that kind of thing. Oh. And as we were leaving the campus at Notasulga that particular day, you could see that the locals, along with the state troopers, had started to pummel them in because they had dragged them off the bus onto the green side. So that was just an event for that particular day. And we eventually went back to school at Notasulga and went through the same drill that we went through at Tuskegee Public, being the troopers and Sheriff Jim Clark's posse, being told, don't show up, don't be here, you're banned, that kind of thing. And a typical day at school at Notasulga was I had classes with Anthony and with Robert. Robert was more like an engineering type guy. Anthony was more like a history kind of guy. So I had taken history in the summer at summer school, so I didn't have to take history. So I didn't have to take that particular class. But my classes were never more than 2 people while at Notasulga High my senior year.
You mean the whole class was 2 people?
There were only 6 people totally in the high school. All the white kids had walked out, Tom.
Oh wow! They went to
Wow.
Macon Academy. They went to the White Knights, huh? Wasn't it?
They went
Yeah.
to they went to Macon Academy. That's very true.
Yeah.
Tom remembers the story.
Wow.
There was a guy on our football team who played it. He said he went to Macon Academy White Knights. That was their name. That was their
It
name.
was. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I just remember him, and it's like, oh, so you didn't go to Tuskegee? No, I went to the Macon Academy White Knights.
Wow.
Michael, you got a comment, question?
Well, first of all, Mr. Wyatt, I want to say thank you for your contribution. And I must say that I admire your disposition. And in order to go through that, you had to not only have intestinal fortitude and mental toughness, but a certain amount of humility to deal with that in the way that you did. I'm not so sure that I would have been able to do that, quite honestly, knowing who I am. Tell me, how did Lee become the lead plaintiff on Lee versus Macon County? Is that Anthony Lee that's in Lee versus Macon County?
That's correct. That's Anthony Lee. And you just had to have a person named to go against to go on the books as a person who was representing the plaintiff. It's like some of the lawsuits we hear about today, where there's only one plaintiff listed, but then 5,000 other people have problems against a drug company, for instance. So that Lee just happened to be the first name there. And from what Anthony tells me, and I'm sure it's true because I knew his father also, that his father had made a deal with Fred Gray that if you don't push this thing, Mr. Lee, in 1960, we'll push it in 63, and we'll put your name at the top. So that's how he got to be Lee versus Macon County. But there were other families involved: the Wyatts, the Joneses, the Carters, the Chamblises, the Billises. But there were several of them. Another interesting thing about the Tuskegee thing to me was we also had to be submitted to and take intelligence exams before we could be admitted into the quote high school. And I later either assumed or believe it to be true that they were looking for kids of average intelligence and not ones who might be super intelligent, because they didn't want their white kids to be shown up, if you will.
Wow.
And the history behind what I feel is there were a couple people in that particular group that were tested, and I always, we all know, what people's intellect can be if you've known them for a while. And Tuskegee was so small, and if you lived around the campus area, you knew all of the kids, and you knew what their backgrounds were and what they were capable of probably doing. But there was one guy, Gerald Billis, who was in that class, and he took the exam, and I kept saying to myself, why wasn't Jerry selected? And I never did come up with any appreciable reason until a couple years ago, because I had lost contact with Jerry. Well, Jerry went on to school at Tulane, became an architect, finished #1 in his class, owned his own business in New Orleans, architectural type. He also went on to MIT. And what did he do? He was #1 in his class at MIT as a grad.
Wow.
So that said to me, okay, Jerry scored exceptionally well on the intelligence exam, and that was one reason why they didn't accept him. Me, Robert, and Anthony were just average, probably compared to them.
So let me understand. You're saying to get into a high school, you had to take an intelligence exam to determine if you could go to a public high school?
Barbara, 1964, that was the standard. 63.
Wow.
Remember, the schools were not integrated at that time.
That's true.
And
That is so
Tuskegee
true.
and Macon County was supposedly chosen because of the makeup of the county and the fact that most of the people who lived in the Macon County area worked for the federal government. So as a result, there was no reprisal for your job.
Right.
Parents who were not associated with the university or with the Veterans Hospital there kind of looked at us and and kind of said, I don't think I'd want to do that. And
Right.
if they did work for some local white-owned company, they would
Right.
probably have been terminated.
Exactly. Oh my.
You know, you mentioned Mr. Foster, and I know that Mr. Foster was there for Henry Harris. Henry was the first black athlete in 1968. So it's good. I didn't know the story behind Mr. Foster, but it's good to know that he was there for you guys, and he's always been a good guy and always been somebody that was willing to help the students. Because when you went to Auburn in those days as a black student, you needed help.
You needed a place to run to, that's for sure. Because we did get out in the community and tried to spur the people on to go and do some things for themselves. But again, you were in a situation in Auburn where if you had a job, it was either one of the mills or it was at the university itself, and your job security was based on how you acted and how you respond to Yasa and Nosa. So we had to be aware of that too. Because on Saturdays we would take it upon ourselves to go out in the community and talk with people, and we eventually formed a group of young high school students who would gather with us on Saturdays to go and integrate some of the places that we were supposedly not to go. Chief Hammock, and I don't know that he was there when you came in or not, but he was the city police chief. So we had our run-ins with him too. And as I don't know whether I mentioned it to Barbara or not, but when I came over to Auburn a couple of weeks ago to be on the panel with Barbara, I stayed over. And when I checked into the hotel, I was talking to the young lady at the desk, and she wanted to tell me a little bit about Auburn. And I said, you're looking at history here. And she says, what do you mean? And I said, well, I was the first black undergraduate to come to Auburn along with another student. She said, oh, that's real history. I said, yeah, because at that point in time, I couldn't walk up to this desk and say, I want a room.
Right.
Because that wasn't going to happen. So it was.
What was it like to go back this many years later and to be on the panel? What was that like for you?
It was good from the standpoint that I could reflect back on where we were and where we think we are now. But I think, Thom, the first time I met you personally was when we did this reunion thing at the 50-year point, when Dr. Franklin was there and several other black alumni had come back. So it wasn't my first time back. Okay. But my observation this time has been that the students still seem to be a little bit reluctant, especially the white students, to approach you or act like you're really somebody who belongs or can be here. And that was kind of eye-opening for me. But as far as going back, I mean, I felt comfortable being an older person now, and going through the life cycle and going through the corporate world and that kind of stuff. It was just something I expected. They would be a little bit standoffish and that kind of thing. The black students that we interfaced with, they were very positive about Auburn, but again, there's an age gap here from the standpoint that I've got a grandchild that's already finished college at age 25. So these guys are 18 and 19 years old, so they have no idea of how things were. They just didn't walk in, and they just walked in on an easy street. They don't know what happened. So I guess the disappointing part was that we tried to reach out to them, and I think student services people are trying to do that, but there's got to be a better job done on that end to let people know this ain't what it used to be. Right. What you're seeing is what people have gone through for the years with blood, sweat, and tears. If anybody had told you that in 1964 you had to have the 101st sitting out in the woods in case something did happen to them two black guys that went to Auburn, and we could come in and swoop them up, they'd never believe that.
Right.
But that's fact.
Barbara, Michael, you got anything else?
I have another question for Mr. Wyatt. I understand you never actually went through graduation at Notasoga. Talk about that experience, and I think 50 years later, you actually got your diploma in March for graduation. Tell us about that.
Well, at Notasoga, the school day was supposed, the school year was supposed to end like on the 25th of May. The superintendent, the principal, Mr. Clemens, was supposedly a known Klansman in Notasoga. On the next to the last day of school, he came in and just handed us diplomas and said, you don't have to come back tomorrow. This is it. So we didn't have a chance to put on gowns and walk and march and that kind of thing. So some 50 years, was actually 49 years later, thanks to an Auburn professor who kind of dug through the history books. We along with the superintendent of education now, who is a Black lady in Macon County, had asked us to come back and march with the Notasoga High School class.
Wow.
Some 49 years later. So at that point in time, we did get a new diploma. We did get caps and gowns that were white. We did spend a whole day with the seniors at the school at that particular time. So it was 50 years later. I've been often asked, how did you not graduate from high school? Of course we did. Go to Auburn University and then end up going to Tuskegee and taking commission as an officer in the military, and then coming out of that and working in corporate America and earning a master's degree. How'd you do all that without getting a high school diploma? And I said, well, it was kind of a formality. The diploma was the formality. We could prove we were high school grads, so we were able to get into schools. But yeah, Barbara, thanks for bringing that up. I kind of repressed that now, I guess.
Yes. Wow.
That's interesting, and because I got there 6 years later, 5 years later, something like that, and you do repress a lot. You repress a lot, man. It took me a long time to deal with it. I was there when it was just James and I. And Henry, and I mentioned it earlier in my opening. Henry spent as much time across the tracks, as we called it, than he did on campus. He was a hero across the tracks, as well he should have been. Should have been a hero on campus, but that was a different time.
You had to. That's where you found family. You had to go across the tracks where the Black people lived in order to find somebody that looked like you and made you feel at home. And so I can truly understand that. It shouldn't have been necessary, but it was. I'm sorry, Dr. Watt, you were about to say something?
No, I was going to just point out that, going across the tracks was something that we would always do. And when you mention those tracks, I remember the assignment, or excuse me, the room that we were able to get from Mr. Foster to live in. We had to walk up, and I don't remember the street, and then actually walk across the track in order to get to the campus on the Magnolia side. And we didn't live in Magnolia the first quarter. So there was an apartment complex just on the right before you got to Magnolia where a lot of the athletes lived. And they were no better than the other students from the standpoint that they would stand out and make cat calls and insulting remarks and that kind of thing. And I've often maintained, Thom, and probably hits you a little bit, that if we had people like Tucker Frederickson and Jimmy Seidler and those guys, to actually step forward at the time we came to school and say, hey, this is how it's going to be, folks. You need to understand that, You know, these guys are not monkeys. They're just people who want to get an education just like you. But none of those people ever came forward to speak positively about the integration of Auburn. And I still think today that athletes will take a stand, because that's, if they don't take a stand, then they're looked at by the student body as people who are leaders. And if they don't take a stand, it's not going to happen. The first Thom football game that me and Anthony Lee attended at Auburn University, we went in and took our seats, and in less than 2 minutes, 10 state troopers sat around us. Why? They say to protect us. I say it was to say, hey, these guys are here. I want you to know they're here. But anyway, that's
So
another impressive.
I've got one more question here. So what do you feel about all this talk today about DEI and getting rid of it, and how we can't talk about history because that's not something you should talk about and deal with, blah, 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 blah. Just your comments on it.
I think it's a guilty conscience speaking out for Caucasians when they say, well, we don't want you to know where all this got started. And we were really ashamed of it, and we don't want anybody to know about it. And when it comes to our athletes, the University of Florida and DeSantis has basically said, you know, we don't want history taught. We don't want those classes there. And I say to black athletes, you need to find another avenue in order to pursue your education. Don't go anywhere and be used.
One of the things that we talked about is, I think you probably went to Auburn, and I know when I was under a consent decree, you mentioned Mr. Gray, and I know that he was the attorney. And so there's been, in terms of dealing with DEI and stuff like that, it's somehow or another that's been twisted to say, where you letting unqualified people into the university. Listening to you talk, you guys were more than qualified to be there. And that's one of the things I think that is a misconception by a lot of people. A lot of people who don't know, and maybe who don't want to know, that these were very highly qualified individuals at that time and now. It's and I'll just say this. I spoke to this class last week. It's an honors class. And there is a group of students, all students of color, not all black, but students of color, who there are 12 of them called the Melton Scholars. And they're named after Harold Melton, who was the first black SGA president, I think, and the Student Services Building is named after him now. And these students are being mentored. First of all, they've been helped financially, but they're also helped personally in terms of how to navigate and negotiate the university. I invited the students, and only 3 of them could come, but the class is about 15 students, and so 3 of those Melton Scholars came. And they've now been there, and they're freshmen, but they've now been there since September. And I met them in September. And then to see them now, these kids have come so far because they feel welcome. They are a part of everything. And man, they asked so many questions. They were comfortable. Probably something that none of us felt when we went the first time. And so it was just a wonderful thing to see them in their comfort level at the university. Anybody got anything else?
I just want to say thank you so much to Mr. Wyatt for joining us, and thank you for sacrifices, for opening the doors for all of us. I know that Dr. Franklin gets credit for being the first student, but he was a graduate student. You and Mr. Lee, first black undergraduate students at Auburn University. And thank you so much for the sacrifices you made to be there.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and anytime I can be of some service or help, let me know.
I'd like to add one more thing, Barbara. You said that President Roberts was at the panel.
The panel discussion.
He and his
Yes.
wife. President Roberts has made a statement that, and I don't know that I'm quoting him exactly, but that he can't do anything about the past, but he can do some things about today and going forward. And I think that we're very fortunate to have his leadership.
I
And
agree.
hopefully the people who work under him will follow his example.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? Okay. All right. Well, we're going to move on. Thank you very much, Mr. Wyatt. It was wonderful. Good to talk to you. And it's great to know that, man, I often say that that 5 to 6 years between when you guys were there and when I went there was like night and day. And it was still pretty dark when I got there.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. So today's show seemed to be all about Auburn, basketball, integration, memories, teamwork as the world continues to evolve and to change. What I won't forget is history. What you can't stop me from talking about is history, especially history that I've lived. History determines not only who we are today, but who we will be tomorrow and on into the future. I want to give my condolences to the family of Big Lynn Johnson, my teammate, and congratulations to the basketball team. And that's our show for today. We want to thank the audience. We appreciate you. Thank our G-list guest, Willie Wyatt. Thank our sponsor, Best Girl. Thanks again to the TWT team, Barbara, Sean, Emily, and Michael. And that's it on this March the 19th. Remember, a day without a smile is a day wasted. If you've got an extra one, give one to someone else today. Enjoy yourself. Make every day count. Stay safe. Peace.